Welcome to Retail Retold, the stories behind how that store landed in your neighborhood. I'm Chris Ressa, in conversation with the people and stories shaping retail and real estate. Brought to you by DLC.
Recording.
Are you there, Chris?
Andy, how are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
I'm at the Hampton Inn in Prospect, Illinois.
Oh, wow. I'm very excited.
Do you know Mount Prospect?
No, where's it at?
Oh, it's Chicago, northwest suburbs next to Arlington Heights. It's a mixed-use project. We own a 1 million square foot project here. That's like a power village, we would call it. So it's a power center with a minor like lifestyle-y component that we've owned for some time here. And we have we've been working on some redevelopments, and we have meetings with the municipality. It's been to make redevelopment is not easy.
I would imagine.
Municipalities want what they want. So we're fighting a good fight.
How far from Naples?
40 minutes. I'm 10 minutes from O'Hare.
Okay.
10 minutes from O'Hare.
Man, I can really hear myself loud and clear. Is there?
You
There's a
can.
big guy that's coming through.
Hold on 1 second. Yeah, I think that's the air conditioning here.
No, it's me. My voice.
Oh, you sound crystal clear to me. You're on mute now.
Yeah. No, I can. I'm on a bit of a delay, and I can hear my voice coming through your computer.
That's wild.
I can hear the soothing strains of my own house.
Look, just curious. Do you hear the air conditioning in the back of mine?
Not at all.
Wow. I don't know how to fix your audio.
So let me mess with this a little bit.
Maybe to log out, so I'll come back in. Let's just access.
Maybe if I turn the volume down.
Wait, it stopped. Right?
Let me try it again.
Hello.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
I hear you great.
Maybe somehow, some way the volume was tied into it. That was odd.
Magic.
Look at that. I am an IT expert.
So I wanted to give you a little more context, more than the emails exchange, just so you just for more context. So so you're familiar with DLC?
Yeah, just from our,
Yeah, so we own about 80 shopping centers, all open air, primarily power and grocery anchored, eastern half of the US. We're a developer, owner, and landlord.
Yep.
And I personally decided to make a move in like 2016 to like really dive into social media. I became the COO at DLC, which meant I oversaw marketing. I came up through the deal making ranks. I thought that my biggest deficiency was going to be the construction world. And I came to find out that my biggest deficiency was actually marketing. So I spent a significant amount of time understanding marketing world. And I realized that from a brand perspective, we were good at marketing. Our industry is good at marketing properties, but not companies.
Right.
And so I got into the social media and, posting, and my marketing department very digitally connected, like a retailer might be, because they're pretty good at, in a restaurant, brands are very good at social media. Obviously, Wendy's might be one of my favorites. If you've seen their Twitter, they're pretty funny. Have you ever seen Wendy's Twitter?
No, I haven't.
Oh, so Wendy's has taken an angle. It's worthwhile there's like things that are like Wendy's top 20 tweets. they've decided to create a brand around like being snarky and funny. And they get they're pretty,
Yeah, pretty aggressive.
I mean, they if the line's here, they are up against the line. They're
Wow.
up against the line. They really go after McDonald's and Burger King.
Really?
It's really,
Oh, I'm sure Dave would be proud.
so we don't do that, but we got very into marketing on social media. And then, you know, we're looking at all the avenues to go of social media, and we decided to launch a podcast. I essentially talk for a living, not from a podcast. That's what you do too, right? You talk to people and cut deals and work all day, and you're talking to people. And we decided there was, on the retail side, there wasn't a ton of podcasts, a little bit more. On the commercial real estate side, very few. As it relates to retail real estate, virtually none. So we saw an opportunity, and for, branding play, to start a podcast. And we started in November of 19. We wanted to have a weekly show. And we said, what would be a good premise based on what we have? And, how do you keep it so it's not vague and the listener and the audience knows what they're getting every week? So we came up with this premise, the story of how that store ended up in your neighborhood. And each week I say this: people will sit around a dinner table and say, they put Starbucks over there. I say the show brings you who they is and how it happened.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. That's
so
awesome.
we do one a week. We're 130 episodes in.
Wow.
So
131 now.
yeah, so we're in the top 20 in retail podcasts, top 20 in commercial real estate. That and a bag of chips will get you over the George Washington Bridge. The point being that, it's become a thing. It has its own website. We spend money promoting it. And, now it's to the point there's a lot of people who are trying to get on the podcast. I would say the people reaching out to us the most are all the growth brands. Right. Anyone who's got like 50 stores and under is probably reaching out to us to try to just tell their story. So what we've done to create a framework and keep the premise of the show is, it's that framework we said, which is: 1, I introduce you; 2, you tell a little bit more about who you are; 3, we want to get a little bit more on the guest, and we go to those 3 questions. We call it clear the air. A little fun.
Awesome.
Then we go into what I used to call a state of the market, which has, I would call it a little bit of that. It's like we'll spend like 7-8 minutes, ask 1 or 2, maybe 2 or 3 questions. And what it turns out to be, which is great, it's mostly retail brands talking about who they are, what they did, what they learned in COVID, what they're doing for their consumer, and all that stuff. So we can certainly do that. I'll probably say, tell us a little bit more about Duck Donuts, and you'll probably be able to go on. And that's what people typically take the opportunity to do.
Yep.
Then the 4th piece is the story. People tell a story about a store that opened that was interesting to them. And then the 5th piece is, I call it retail wisdom. It's just those last 3 questions that are fun questions. And that's what we do. And it'll be, 45 minutes or less, and it'll be fun. So I do have a couple questions for you. 1, how do I say your last name?
So if it were spelled phonetically, it would be Kimmick. Kmiec.
Kmiec. Okay.
Not Irish.
So Kmiec. So Andy Kmiec. Okay. And you've been in, let's call it retail real estate for, it looks like, over 20 years.
Yeah. 20 years, 15 on the retailer side, 5 on the landlord side, and now back on the retailer side with Duck Donuts.
And
which is more fun?
well, if you're at a growing brand, it's fun.
You got that right.
right? If you're at a growing brand, right? Nobody wants to be closing stores and doing rent reductions. Everyone wants to be, putting their name on the store that opened and does double
Exactly.
chain store average.
Yeah, no, I did the whole workout thing with Brookfield. Dealing with the tenants and the retailers. That's tough sledding.
Yeah. And okay, so Andy Kmiec, you've been in the uh, retail real estate industry for over 20 years. You've spent time on both the tenant and the landlord side. Today you are you're the vice president of development at Duck Donuts, recently
Right.
started. And I'll say, tell us a little bit more about you, Andy, and we'll go from there. Does that work?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So I'll take it from there then. So
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start.
Oh, you're going to start. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to start now. I just wanted to, no, you're
Sure.
fine. I just wanted to make sure, I can re-record anything, but I just want to make sure that I get people's names right.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at intros, so sometimes I re-record the intro, but here I go.
No problem. All right. So I'm glad that this is going to be edited.
Yeah. So, what most people care, what I've come to find, what most people care about, actually, I don't want to psych you out, but what most people care about is I get an email and it'll say, I thought about that. I said, like 300 times. Can you get that out? And I say, my team will do the best they can.
That's awesome. And you know what? It's funny you bring that up because I did think about that this morning. Right.
You know what?
Using the word right.
Most people actually say it way less than they think. And when they do, they actually do it. They're like, and it actually like flows. And I don't think it like sounds like, no one wants to sound stupid, right? I think that's the punchline.
Ultimately.
Right? That's ultimately what they're going for, right? So Anyway, here we go. Welcome to Retail Retold, everyone. Today I'm joined by Andy Kmiec. Andy is the vice president of development for Duck Donuts. He has been in the industry for over 20 years. He's been both on the landlord and tenant side of retail real estate. He brings a wealth of knowledge. I think Duck Donuts is a super interesting brand. I'm excited for him to be here. Welcome to the show, Andy.
It's awesome to be here. Thank you for having me on.
So, Andy, why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about who you are?
Sure. Yeah, I would love to. And again, thank you for this opportunity. Duck Donuts is an awesome brand. It's 106 stores strong now. It's growing. Love the product. Those are the things that really attracted me to Duck Donuts when I first started looking at the opportunity to have the product sell itself. It's served warm and fresh, and really to have the people that are going in experiencing it. It's fantastic. It's great to see the growth. We've got a lot of franchisees, a lot of candidates who are looking to join the system. We've got a lot of opportunities in the world of real estate that are being offered to us. So it's great to be a part of an emerging brand, and it's a strong market. The donut industry at $7 billion and projected to grow by another, say $5 billion over the next 5-6 years. It's fantastic to be a part of.
Yeah. So I first became, in our industry, you and I are always in tune with brands probably earlier than most consumers just because of the industry. However, I became familiar with Duck Donuts as a consumer.
Yeah.
My in-laws have a home in Avalon, New Jersey, and Duck Donuts opened up. And at the time I had thought it was just like a local donut shop. I didn't realize it was a national brand. Yeah. When I went in, the thing that blew my hair back, the little that I do have, was that it was made to order, and I could choose what I wanted on my donut that day, and it wasn't pre-made. And I was blown away by that. And then the chocolate icing that was on my donut was, I had to skip lunch that day, but it was incredible. And
that's better than lunch.
That's better than lunch. And that's how I became familiar with Duck Donuts. So
And
Uh,
that's, you know what, it's funny you say that, because when we look at the franchisees that we've got in our system, and a lot of these, a lot of the candidates who approach us about opening up a location, it's for that very reason. They were on vacation. They were in the Outer Banks. They were in Myrtle Beach. They were in Pittsburgh, or, some Main Street USA. They tried the product there, and they just loved it. I think that's, from our perspective, that's the biggest thing that separates us from the competition. How the product is prepared, it's made fresh for you, to how you want it topped. It's not a matter of turning a sign on out front that says, they're hot now, come get them now. It's every time you walk into that store, it's you're going to have that same experience. And from my background, that's the most important thing from that brand, that the brand standards and the brand awareness. And when people walk into a location, regardless if it's in Florida or Avalon, New Jersey, or out in Idaho, it's that same experience. You're going to get that same customer service, that same awesome product, and you're going to walk away just satisfied and glad that you skipped lunch. In your case, glad that you did that, because it is, it's an awesome treat.
It really is. Okay, Andy, I want to pivot. I want to learn a little bit more about Andy for a second.
Sure.
I've got 3 questions for you. We call this Clear the Air. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm prepared, hopefully.
All right, Andy. Question 1.
Okay.
What is one skill you don't possess but wish you did?
Playing the guitar. And what's interesting about that is that I'm ambidextrous. So I don't know if I would play left-handed or right-handed, but yeah, I would say playing the guitar would be one skill that I don't have that I'd like to pursue.
Do you write lefty, righty?
I write right-handed. I can write left-handed. I would like to say the nuns cured me of that when I was young. I throw left-handed. So I eat left-handed. So yeah, I use both.
Do you golf?
I golf right-handed, and I think that is, I blame that on my dad who taught me how to play. So I also blame my slice on him. I blame my lack of putting on him. But my brothers, I have a brother that golfs left-handed. So I think that the first day, if I grabbed his clubs, I probably would have golfed left-handed, but I grabbed my dad's. So I golf right-handed.
Interesting. Okay. Very, very cool. Are you musically inclined?
No, and as anybody who knows, I cannot sing. So no.
Okay. All right. Question 2. What is one thing most people agree with, but you do not?
In light of the All-Star game being held yesterday, the baseball All-Star game, I'm an old school. I think that pitcher should hit. I don't agree with the DH. I hate seeing the DH in the American League. Yeah. Don't agree with. I also don't agree with Interleague baseball either. I think that the All-Star game has lost its luster. At the very least, it should be about, it's about the competition, right? It's about the rivalries between cities and between regions. So to see the Yankees and the Mets play each other, the White Sox and the Cubs play each other, I think that that's entertaining. But I don't know, to have Pittsburgh play Minnesota and to take games out of the schedule where I'd rather see them play Philadelphia or some other teams in this area, I'd rather see that. And the DH, I don't know. I mean, if you're a pitcher and you throw the ball at, you throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball at somebody's head, you should be held to account when you're up to bat and you're now staring at their pitcher. So there's got to be some accountability there.
Wow. What an incredible answer. As a baseball fan, I love getting rid of the DH. I think that is a really interesting concept. It's been talked about for years, obviously,
Yeah.
But I love that idea. For me, it's not an accountability piece. For me, it would be another element to the game that I think is just interesting. It's missing.
Yeah.
The interleague play, I was a huge fan when they started this. I don't know that I would want to see it go. maybe refined personally.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, I don't, the National League game, you're talking to someone who grew up in Pittsburgh. So the National League game from a management perspective, there's much more to it than an American League game. You know, if you're subbing out your pitcher and where they're at and they're hitting ninth in the lineup, but where they're coming up in the order, you know, you're making double switches and there's timing with that. There's just more strategy to a National League game than there is an American League game. And that's, you know, when you got big boppers in the lineup in the American League, it's, you know, I don't know. There's probably more fastballs thrown in one league than the other. I don't know that, but I don't know. To me, it's about the game and it's about, you know, the strategies there. And that's one of the reasons why I'd say, you know, do away with the DH.
I love the answer. Thank you for sharing. Last question.
Okay.
When is the last time you did something for the first time?
So the last time that I did something for the first time would be my in-laws own some property over in Wyoming. And when we were visiting there last summer on vacation, we went horseback riding with the kids. That was something I'd never done before.
Very, very cool. How'd you like it?
You know what, it was fun. I couldn't imagine, you know, obviously you're not in shape to ride a horse. You know, it's, I couldn't imagine riding it for miles on end. You'd be really sore, but it was fun. It was fun to take a spin around. We had some cowboys there that were helping us out and kids loved it. So I enjoyed it. It was fun. I'd do it again. Let's put it that way.
All right. But not for 20 miles.
No. When they say walking, saddle sore, that's, I couldn't do it.
Okay. Well, that was fun. I love the answers. Thank you for sharing. Let's talk a little bit about Duck Donuts. What is Duck Donuts up to these days? And how was moving from COVID to a post-COVID world?
So, all right. So 2 questions there, and I'll tackle the maybe the second one first, and then we'll get back to the COVID, because I think it'll the state of affairs, how Duck Donuts is doing today, because they'll bleed one into the other.
Sure.
COVID really, from a business model perspective, really highlighted a lot of things, and I think this is true in the retail world, and it was true for us, and that was the need to have other ways to get your product into the hands of the consumer. For us, it was with storefronts that were not drive-through. It really put an emphasis on our app, ordering through the app, ordering through online, pickup, curbside service, utilizing delivery, Grubhub and DoorDash and organizations like that.
How does it travel? I'm curious. How does it, if I get it delivered, how does it travel?
It travels well because, that turnaround time is going to be fairly quick, between the time that either you pick it up at our door or, when Grubhub or somebody is actually walking into the store. They're made fresh. Those orders come in, those donuts are prepared right there with the toppings, and that donut travels very well. And it's the beauty of it is because, it's made fresh, it's made warm, it's made to order. So it's not like you're worrying about something that was prepared, hours ago or the day before or something like that. That you start to put even more age onto the product. And, you come back to the base donut that we use, that cake donut, the batter that we use. It's not a yeast donut. Yeast is activated, continues to eat away at the sugars within the donut, and over time that donut becomes more stale. It's a cake-based donut. It's an awesome product, and so relying on those channels to help build our business, it also gave us the as far as additional business models. It really put a light on that. How else are, outside of our traditional real estate, what other ways are we going to be able to get product into the hands of our consumers, not just through the channels that I talked about, but through like food trucks and concession trailers and doing a shipping container store over in California. We're opening our first drive-through location here this fall, here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So it's also caused Duck Donuts to review the business model to see what other opportunities there are for growth. And that's really one of the exciting things about joining Duck Donuts. It's coming into a situation where it's a young company. First location opened in 2007. First franchise location was 2013, 106 locations. It's a great time to be a part of this brand and the growth that we're going to be seeing here in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years as we go from just over 100 stores to 300 to 500 stores. It's a great time.
A lot there. I got a lot of things running through my head here. So
Yeah.
one, your franchisee.
Yeah.
Do you know how many franchisees are multi-unit operators?
Sure. Yeah. So within that 106 stores, we've got about 70 franchisees. So quite a few single unit operators. There are multi-unit operators in the system. The company, what's interesting is the company has one company-owned store here, near the headquarters. The drive-through location will be company-owned as we test it, as we prove out that business model. But 99% of the stores are owned by franchisees.
And on the go forward, taking a step back, we see franchise concepts all the time, and you've been at some places where you have like massive companies that own like 300 locations. They're a franchisee, but like they're like we know Carol's Carol's and stuff is a company that owns like hundreds of Burger Kings, and we have private equity groups that have gotten into franchising.
Yeah.
Do you see this continuing to be this mom and pop operator? And I'm not sure if that's the right characterization.
Sure.
Or do you see it moving to where you're trying and going to sell packages of 50 to one franchisee?
So, a couple things there. One, would we shy away from an operator who wants to come in and open 25 locations? I don't know. We wouldn't shy away from it, but we would want to understand their business plan, their business model for the brand. So what's really important for us, and I think it's important to understand, is that the franchisees that we've got in our system, and that kind of that ideal franchisee that we look for when we're looking to approve new franchisees to join the system. These are people who are engaged in their local markets. They know their local markets. They're involved in the community in a bunch of different ways.
Sure.
They understand what it takes to build the brand, to operate the store. The people who are coming into their customers are going to be neighbors. They're going to be people that they know. They're going to be friends. So I think it really helps when you've got, when you've got that connection at the local level, which I think you lose when, when you get to that 30 store, 40 store, 50 store. I dealt with large franchisees.
You have, yeah. And that moves, you're moving from the small business model to a corporate conglomerate almost.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it can't be done, and that's why I'm saying we would entertain it. I dealt with some very large franchisees at Auntie Anne's and Focus Brands that did a fantastic job of operating their stores because they understood the brand, they understood what made the brand successful, they understood the customer service, the quality of the product, and the need to make sure that product is being delivered warm and fresh. And so they understood that. So they had infrastructure in place. They had general managers, people who were compensated well based on the performance of the store, based on the marks that they would get through their customer, through the secret shop, and the customer feedback and the surveys that they would get from the franchisor. So I could see where that, we would trend towards that here at Duck Donuts, but we really enjoy having, having that kind of franchisee be a part of the system. And, and when you've got multiple operators, say in the state of Pennsylvania, because we're here in Pennsylvania, you've got multiple operators and there's real estate opportunities that come available. Then you've got different franchisees who are interested in that particular site. And then you're in the position of selecting the best franchisee who's going to fit in that store, with that store, and is going to be the best opportunity to drive the brand and drive the sales with that location.
Well, thank you for sharing that good perspective there. When you look at the landscape of, you mentioned the $7 billion donut market and growing,
Yeah, it's huge.
mind blowing. I think of donuts, I'm thinking of like Dunkin' Donuts or Dunkin' now, and
Yeah.
donut shop and brands. Are these who you guys think are competitors when you're analyzing a market?
No, and I'll tell you why. So, and Dunkin', you started to say Dunkin' Donuts. They're a coffee shop that sells donuts now.
Yeah.
They've rebranded. No, we don't, and because the Duck Donuts, that brand is so different. It's made to order. It's not your typical walk in. You've got the donuts on the shelf, that have been sitting there for however long. It's you look at it and you think, well, how many preservatives are in there, and how long will this keep, and will this last? And it's a different mindset. When you walk into a Duck Donuts, that product is going to be made fresh and it's going to be made to order for you as you're standing there, or it's going to be delivered, warm and fresh to you at your store. And it's a different experience altogether, and that's why you talk about the donut, that category being 7 billion and what it's going to grow to here in the next few years. I really think that for Duck Donuts, it's really, for us, it's disrupting that category, because we are introducing something that's different. Even when you look at when you think about Russ DiGilio, who founded the company, this is someone who grew up going to the Jersey Shore, was used to Ocean City and Browns and O's, and getting a warm cinnamon sugar donut while he was there on the boardwalk. But then with his family going to the Outer Banks, there was nothing there. He could have gone into the bakery at the grocery store and grabbed something that, again, is a similar experience to a Dunkin' Donuts or a Krispy Kreme or something like that. But he wanted that something different. He really believed in that idea. And so, he opened his first location in Kitty Hawk and Duck. They almost opened simultaneously. That's thus how we got the name Duck Donuts. For those of you who don't know how we got that name. And that was, for him, it was creating that business model, was creating something different that, has grown in time to the point where, we're at 100 stores strong today and looking to get to that next benchmark, 300, 500, what the future holds.
Great insights there. Now and I know this is a big one, when you go to the market and you're talking to franchisees and you're selling the brand, and you have those, I'm sure you have days where you bring franchisees to the corporate office. What do they call those days?
Discovery Days. Oh yeah.
Discovery Days.
Yeah. People got catchy names for them, but boiled down, it's a Discovery Day.
Right. One of the things I know franchisees look for is the AUV compared to peers.
Yeah.
And how is the AUV of Duck Donuts versus the peers?
Well, I don't know that you can compare us, to a Dunkin' Donuts or to a Krispy Kreme. I think that, when you look at us and what we're attempting to do, we're the largest made to order donut, in the category, the Duck Donuts brand. So, to say that, our goal is to have a Duck Donuts on every street corner in Manhattan, or that's not what we're about. We're really trying to protect the franchisees. We're trying to protect the brand. We're trying to grow smart. There's wisdom behind the locations that we're looking for, that we're engaging in those conversations to open up a location. We're looking to benefit our franchisees. when you look at an FDD and you look at the, you look at the back of the FDD with all the litigation, that's not what we're about. There's other brands that would put a location right across the street from another. And that's not what we're about. We're about driving our average unit volumes and trying to give our franchisees as much opportunity to grow, to be successful. And so, the average unit volume, I can tell you, Chris, that, obviously COVID put a dent into our business. We're up 30% over last year.
Wow.
And we're up almost 4% over 2019, which 2019 was a good year. So, I can say that we're trending in a great direction. We're trending positively, which is fantastic for the brand.
Is the AUV higher than a Krispy Kreme or a Dunkin'?
No. We're going to be in that $630,000 range. So, compare that to what they do. Remember, they're mass producing in essence, right? They're mass producing their beverages, their product, their bake, the donuts that they serve. We're about we're going to be more custom. We're going to be more tailored to that local market. And that's one thing I did. Yeah. One thing I didn't mention was catering. There's a lot of catering that our franchisees perform. I've heard about in the time that I've been here. I know that they've catered weddings, they cater birthday parties. Yeah, I couldn't imagine having a wedding and serving duck donuts to the bridal party and to the
really
guests.
Cool.
But they're doing it, and I think it speaks to why donuts are exploding now, why that category is exploding now, why it's so interesting. And there's 200 million people in the U.S. who eat donuts, which I was blown away when I saw that number. I couldn't imagine 200 million people eating donuts on a regular basis. Yeah, that's significant.
Wow.
And when you think about, when you think about how we approach business at the local level with our franchisees, just like what you said, you thought it was a one-off brand.
I did.
That's the right, the expectation that someone's going to walk in and get something that's regional, local to them. That's what they want. So that millennial snacker, the mom with the kids, that's the experience that they're looking for. That's the product and the taste that they're looking for.
Yeah, I would tell you it is a premium product for sure.
Yeah.
It is a premium product. There is no doubt about that. Well, that was excellent insights on Duck Donuts. I really appreciate you going through it. I'm excited to see what you guys do. Glad to hear the growth story up over 2019. Awesome to hear. I want to move. We're running short on time. I'm conscious of your time. I want to move to the story, and you have a story about a location that opened somewhere. So, what brand and what town are we going to?
Yeah, so maybe if we do this again, in however many months from now, I'll have a story to share with you about Duck Donuts. But
sure.
But the story that I'm going to share with you dates back to my time with Auntie Anne's pretzels.
Okay.
When I began my career at Auntie Anne's.
What town are we in?
We're in Orlando.
Orlando.
So this location's in Orlando. When I started my career with Auntie Anne's, it was in the operations department, and gave me a great foundation for understanding the brand, interacting with the franchisees. It was a great experience. And I transitioned into real estate, and my first region was the Southeast region. It was the most mature. People would say, "Oh, I don't know how many deals you're going to get down there. We got a lot of stores already." So for me, it was coming in and trying to find what that next business model, the next evolution of Auntie Anne's was going to look like. And it was about that time that outlet centers were really, they hadn't exploded. Premium outlets and Tanger, we take it for granted today, but back 2004, 2005, outlet centers still had that kind of that connotation of cardboard boxes on the ground that, you went through, and the sleeve on your polo shirt, the left sleeve would be longer than the right.
Right.
And so there was an outlet center on International Drive on I Drive that was small. It was owned by Bell's. It flipped over to Prime Prime Outlets, who, that's a brand that no longer exists, but Prime had bought them. And, I looked at it and I thought, yeah, I think, it's outdoor center. I think at Auntie Anne's, getting away from that traditional enclosed mall business model, I think Auntie Anne's would potentially do well here. But it was a matter of finding the right location within the center, and there wasn't anything available. It's pretty small. Prime did a huge expansion, and trying to find a space that was in our, in that sweet spot of size, that 500 to 800 square feet was really difficult. And they leased it up quickly. There wasn't anything in there that I thought, would lend itself well to a successful Auntie Anne's. And so fortunately, for me anyways, there was a local restaurant that was right at Main and Main. And this was about the time that Prime was bought out by Premium Outlets. So this got reflagged as a premium outlet. So this is in the 2011 range. So think about it, 2005, 2011. Yeah, that's wow. Every time I'd fly to Florida and go look at space and visit with franchisees, I'd drive by there to see what we could do and maintain the relationship with the different deal makers to see what would come of it. So here we are in this 6-year window. So you want to talk about patience and perseverance. And there was a local restaurant there that was right at Main and Main. They had opened up. I talked to the operator because it seemed like the space was bigger than what he needed. So I said, hey, maybe we could carve out an Auntie Anne's. And while this conversation's going on, he goes bankrupt, and he closes his store. So I called up the deal maker and I said, hey, who's on the space, and who's looking to come in. And so I heard that Polo and Gap was looking to expand. And I said, okay, look, you've got an entryway that's exterior, but it's under a tower. I said, why don't we do a 200 square foot kiosk? We can pull the utilities, because it was a restaurant, pull the utilities out of the space. We'll figure out the storage piece. So it took a lot of convincing, as you can imagine, dealing with Simon, to entertain that idea. It wasn't budgeted space for them, which really helped the cause. So then it was selling on that side, and then finding the franchisee, internally, who would buy into that idea of, this is definitely a non-traditional spot. So, and I found that, they've got other operations, other locations in and around Orlando. Visited the site, toured it with them. They bought into the idea that, even at 200 square feet in an outdoor building in Orlando, with thunderstorms every afternoon in the summertime, they bought into that idea. They could see the vision. They could see, the idea that they could push the volume out, and we did the deal. And it opened up in 2013, late 2012, early 2013. So they're going to be coming up on their 10-year lease, but very successful store for them. Probably, I don't know, top 3-4 stores in their portfolio of maybe 90 or 100 Auntie Anne stores.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, very happy they did it. And every time I go to Orlando and I go look at that store, I think to myself, that is because of me, that thing is, that location, that store is sitting there. So
what an excellent story about creativity, patience, perseverance.
Yeah.
So I want to unpack it a little bit. So I think the message about, you identified the market and the real estate, but the message about finding the right location is point well taken, right? I don't know that most people want to wait 6, 7. The reality is it was almost a decade before site was identified, before they opened the doors. And that's a long time. Some would argue, well, did you miss out on market share and all these things, right? Yeah. So I right. What sales did you miss during that period of time that you didn't, execute? But when you say now that it's a top location out of the 90 that operator has, I think the point is well taken, that when you know your brand and you know what works from a real estate perspective, sticking to that makes sense. However, that doesn't mean that you can't get creative to make it happen.
Yeah, that's right.
And change the game. So going back, when one of the things that came in my head when you started thinking and saying, well, Simon was actually thinking about doing an expansion in the restaurant versus
Yep.
leasing it to you, did the discussion or thought process come that to get the real estate that you might buy the lease out of bankruptcy?
It was so expensive. The volume of square footage in that restaurant. They had Polo, they were getting them teed up. They were getting Gap teed up for their expansion. So I knew that it was just way too big for us to try to bite off. And when you're competing with, brands, national retailers like that have, relationships that, maybe they're trying to get something done, in the Simon portfolio in another state. So you're dealing with, forces there that I recognized, and understanding our business model. I knew that for the rent that we would end up paying for that spot, that it was best to go with this, 200 square foot outdoor kiosk. And that was going to be our play. That understanding, recognize that we would never be able to compete with the Polos of the world. So now I when you go there and you walk that center on I Drive and you see that Auntie Anne's sitting there at Main and Main, I'm sure more than one person has looked at it and thought, just like, how we started, how did that get there?
Yeah. How
did that location, how were they able, Auntie Anne's Pretzels, how were they able to get that 200 square foot space smack dab next to Polo, in this tower area? How are they able to do that? Well, that's how it was done.
I have more questions.
Go right ahead. I got answers, hopefully.
The outdoor kiosk.
Yeah.
At the time, were there a lot of them throughout the Auntie Anne's portfolio?
No.
So what does it cost to build one of those? I've always wondered. I'm in the construction business. I don't even know. What does it cost to build one of those outdoor kiosks?
So remember, we got to talk Duck Donuts too about, for DLC and what kind of deals get done in the portfolio. This is, and it's about, that creativity, right? And it comes back to the business model with the franchisees and what pencils, what makes sense for them. Because the last thing I want to do is, set them up for a tough road.
Yep.
Set them up for failure, set them up for a struggle. That's you want to set them up for success. So an outdoor building, a traditional build out in that Auntie Anne's system, you're probably in the $300,000 range. That's just for the build out and the equipment. That's not including all the other costs, 3.5. On that particular building, I bet you they ended up spending maybe closer to 2.5 on that because of this. It's less square footage, but you're still pulling utilities. There was a lot of infrastructure that needed to be done. You still had to build out a storage unit that needed to be plumbed. There were still costs there that you wouldn't think about necessarily, but the expense, it was still there, and fortunately it penciled. For the volume that they're doing there, it's great.
Good for them. Well, listen, that was a great story. I love the innovation. I love the self-awareness to know that I'm competing with all these other brands for this real estate. I want to be over there. Let me find a unique way. Location was there, but I wanted to be creative in the type of building. I think that's really interesting. I also think that lends itself. You mentioned Duck Donuts again, and then going back to you guys, I've seen some creativity in the types of buildings and you guys are being innovative with the types of buildings to get the right real estate, right? You have downtown locations. You're now building a freestanding drive-through. You have beachy touristy places. You have places in Pennsylvania. So I think you guys are also being creative.
Right.
Going back to one of the things I was going to ask when we were running short on time real quick, you mentioned one of the innovations of Duck Donuts kind of accelerated through the pandemic was the online ordering, mobile ordering.
Yep.
I've seen all these like QSR stats where people are like, we're at 5% mobile ordering and we're trying to push that to 10. Is there a strategy internally? Where are you guys at today? Has it settled out somewhere? Do you guys know where you're at from a mobile, what percentage of our sales are coming from mobile versus walk-in?
Well, as far as settling down, that hasn't that hasn't happened, because you're going to have stores in states that have opened sooner than others. So you've got people who are out and about, able to get back into a store that's reopened, who wanted to get out, who wanted to experience that in person again. The ordering of the donuts. So there's going to be some states that are going to be, ahead of the game than others. So that the jury is still out on where this is going to end up ultimately landing. But I think it comes back to understanding our business model and really just trying to make sure that our franchisees, are successful. And how does that look? And what does that look like, a year from now, 2 years from now, as we venture down other business models, the food trucks and the drive-thrus and the container stores, the shipping container stores, models like that, as you expand your reach, excuse me, as you expand your reach and you grow the brand, that's why, when you look at average unit volumes, average unit volume for a traditional store is this, an average unit volume for a food truck is that, average unit volume for a concession trailer is going to be this. Ultimately, how successful are we? How much money are the franchisees making? What's that return on investment look like? And that occupancy that we're paying from a rent perspective with the landlords, what does that look like? It's always monitoring that business model to make sure that we're growing, we're healthy, and we're making the right decisions.
As franchise brands grow, and this more than most people, they start to explore different opportunities to extend the reach.
Yeah.
And you all are doing that. And I think you're being innovative. The shipping container and food truck, I think, is really spot on for the brand. I totally get it. And it makes a lot of sense. Has there been discussion about, and it's probably not today because you're still at 106 units and you got to get some more, but has there been discussion with what the other brands in franchise world have done, like food halls and airports and all those types of things? And I know you're very familiar with that stuff.
Yeah, I am, from my past experience, certainly have had opportunities to work on that kind of real estate. It's knowing our demographic, knowing our customers, and where are those customers at. It's the analytics, it's the cell phone data, the mobilytics, it's those types of things, and understanding, the DMAs that we want to grow in, and then what does that look like? So go ahead, Chris.
No, so you mentioned, I like the demographics. You mentioned two things before. Obviously, millennials seem to love donuts, so that and the local feel, made to order, premium brand.
Yeah,
obviously is millennial. You mentioned the mom. Is that like the core demographic, those two cohorts?
Yeah, and office heroes. As people are now getting back into the office, in those states that, it's the stopping and grabbing a dozen donuts on the way into the office. It's grabbing something, grabbing a treat in the afternoon. I think that for me personally, I've always enjoyed, like at dinner time, I've enjoyed an omelet, pancakes. I could eat breakfast all day long. And I think that there's that mindset, over the past, few years where traditionally foods that were associated with breakfast are now being enjoyed all day long. And I think when you look at the dessert concept as well with Duck Donuts, I think it's filling, some different tastes there. Donuts have been around forever. They've been around for decades and decades and decades. So donuts aren't going anywhere. How they're presented and packaged and all that might change a little bit, but that indulgent treat, at our price point, that's always going to be there. So then it's a matter of, okay, well, building off of that idea, how are we looking to grow? What's the next, what's that next step for us? And understanding the demographics and understanding who our customers certainly feeds into that.
Well, that is a great spot, I think, to end. That was a great closing right there on Duck Donuts. And I think you mentioned the word disrupt earlier, and you mentioned donuts have been around forever. I think Duck Donuts has disrupted the donut market, and they've been innovative on a market that's been probably stale for a long time. And
that's a good one right there.
There you go. And And Duck Donuts has been part of the donut revitalization and making it an exciting segment. So kudos to you all. Good
Thank
luck
you.
in the new role. And I think you're going to be an excellent addition for them.
I appreciate that.
The last part of the show, I got 3 fun questions for you. We call it retail wisdom. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's hit it.
All right. Question 1. What extinct retailer do you wish would come back from the dead?
So I grew up with a department store called Kaufman's. It was a regional. I don't know. You're out of Jersey, so I don't know if you remember.
I'm familiar though.
Yeah, familiar with the brand. And Kaufman's was a regional player. They were bought up by Macy's. And the reason why I miss Kaufman's, my mom would always bribe me to go shopping with her at the mall. And so, I've got fond remembrances of Kaufman's, going to Westmoreland Mall in Western Pennsylvania, and then downtown Pittsburgh, Christmas time to go check out the storefront. So that's, I've got great remembrances of that. And I also remember my mom saying when Macy's bought them out and reflagged them and got away with the more regional apparel and goods that were in there, and went to, just kind of that broad, across the board ordering that Macy's does. I remember her saying, I will never step into a Macy's store. So, and she did.
Wow.
So that was, that's why that sticks out in my mind.
Great answer. I don't think we've ever heard that on the show. So great answer. Question 2. What is the last item over $20 you bought in a store?
Well, you know what? That's an easy one. So we've got a smoker, and I like to smoke, ribs and pork shoulder and brisket and all that kind of good stuff. So we've got buddies coming in this weekend for a gathering. So I went last week and bought mesquite and hickory chips. I usually smoke with wood, but it can be challenging to control the temperature and the smoke and all that. So I thought I'd try the chips. So I'll let you know on that. The jury, I'll know this weekend whether or not it's going to be successful. But we went to a local hardware store to get the chips. So yeah, that was the last purchase over $20.
Okay. And last question. If Andy and Chris were shopping at Target and I lost you, what aisle would I find you in?
So other than making a PA announcement, looking for Andy
Yes.
Kmiec, meet me at the front. After this conversation, for the last hour about food, you'd find me in the snack food. You'd
Got
see
it.
me with the candy bars and the all that good stuff, the cereal, all the good snack food stuff, all the good sugary stuff. Yeah, my goodness, yeah.
Well, now I know. So that's great. Listen, this has been excellent. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Great insights. Excited for you, excited for the brand. And we'll have to stay in touch and, see where our paths cross.
Definitely. I love it. Thanks for reaching out. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you, man. All right, Andy.
Appreciate you. We'll
All
see
right.
ya.
Take care, man.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Appreciate you watching. Hit subscribe. See you in the next one.